She is 15 years old, and she is here today to share her opinions on alternative forms of education, especially for kids in the Asian community. And she wants them to question and take ownership of their own education. So please welcome Srisha. Yeah, I'm not sure how to ask this, but it's I do feel like some people when they turn your age, like 15 to maybe 17 or 18ish, that's when some people will begin to question a lot of schooling if they've
100%.
been in that system for a long time. But I really want to know about your personal experience with that when this seed, I would say, of this idea was planted or appeared or you noticed it.
Right. So my first moment, I would say, was 7th grade. It's when it really fostered. Um, I think it was 7th grade because all the years before that, I was very much enjoying my schooling experience. I had a lot of friends. I was not very questioning the education itself because I was mainly learning from home. I would learn the curriculum already at home. So at school, it wasn't much learning. It was just getting past the grades and being the smartest one in the class. And I benefited from that. But then 7th grade came along, and I was not actively learning grades ahead of my grade level. And I got frustrated that I wasn't actually learning. My first exposure, I would say, to this frustration was watching TED Talk. I watched specifically Sir Ken Robinson and his talk about education being a death valley. And that's when I really opened my eyes to, hey, yeah, what am I really getting from my schooling experience? What am I getting from these tests? What am I getting from the ways of teaching that we stand on? So that was my first exposure, and I remember talking to my parents. I said I wanted to reform the education system. I want to make this huge change that's going to change America forever, right?
Hmm.
So I had this big idea because I didn't want to, I guess, determine my self-worth on a letter grade. So that was my first seed of frustration, I would say.
Yeah, so it's like that TED Talk sparked
Mm,
something within you. Sounds
mhm.
like. Mm-hmm.
It made me question what value these years have brought me, really. And it made me realize that, oh, it was only because I had already learned the 3rd grade curriculum in the kindergarten, right? It was only because I was learning ahead, mainly due to my parents, I would say, learning at home, that placed me ahead of my peers. And I had this almost superiority complex. I was like, wow, I'm doing so good. Like, I am the top of the class, and I would get praised by my teachers, by my peers. And I felt so good, and I was benefiting from that system. But then slowly, I would say my parents got more busy, and I wasn't grade levels ahead. And it slowly caught up to me that, hey, whatever I'm learning isn't really benefiting me in the way that I thought it would. I was always fostered in this very competitive world. And for the longest time, it didn't bother me because I felt very special. I
Mm-hmm.
think this is a common thing within kids who are labeled gifted. I had a very high reading level at a very young age. Um, I was told by teachers that I was in the top of the class. I was told a lot of facts. I read a lot, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I didn't really understand what was going on, but I enjoyed it. And I think as a kid, you never really question what's going on. You just kind of go with the flow. But then you really as you age and develop, you start to question, well, why are these things happening? You know, you start to fall behind on competition as it gets increasingly difficult. And I would say seventh grade was when I genuinely felt uh, not knowledgeable. I didn't feel like I was as smart as I would have been in, third grade. I felt like I peaked in the third grade, which is
Huh.
crazy to say. But I thought that if I wasn't the smartest, if I wasn't the fastest, if I wasn't the best at everything, then I was somehow worthless. But that's what happened when I was like the rest of the kids. I felt like, oh, I'm like the rest of the kids. I am not 3 grade levels above what I'm currently learning. Therefore, I am not of any value, which is not a good mentality at all, right? Especially for a kid to have at seventh grade. Um, but it made me step back and think that, hey, learning isn't all about books. Learning, there's a lot of important skills that I've also missed out on, right? I would say to a certain extent, video games teach kids a lot about, I would say, team building, trying again. Those are some good aspects of video games. But that's always been my life. It's always been, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do think a lot of people can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you play video games now?
No, I've never really
Oh,
played video games.
okay.
I would say it's so funny because ever since I was a little kid, I always had a milestone to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say since kindergarten, my milestone was get into the gifted program, right? And then in the gifted program, all the kids kind of brag whatever percentile they landed in. So I was like, yeah, I got the 99th percentile. You only got 97. So it was a really kind of bad idea that was stemmed inside of myself that I was almost superior than everyone else. And then when middle school arrived, it was, oh, I have to get into a high school STEM school. That was the next milestone, right?
Oh,
So
okay.
I said, right. So that was one of the biggest pressures of my life
Mm-hmm.
so far was to get into this high school STEM school. So here, I guess that's really hyped up. It's whoever gets in the STEM school is seen as smart. It's what is equivalent to success, right? So
Oh,
I really
wow.
used to buy into that, right?
Okay.
I
Yeah.
really used to buy into that. I was like, yes, that is the only way of success. Anyone who didn't get into these schools are not smart enough. I subconsciously put everyone on a hierarchy, which was crazy to think about that I had all these attitudes that was basically told to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had relatives. You have a lot of comparison going on. That's what I'm trying to say. It's already like you're pushed into this race, and it seems like the only objective is to get first. But what we don't question is, why am I running this race? You know? What is winning this race in a sport that I might not even find useful to me? How is that valuable? But I wasn't questioning these things because those things made me terrified. It was like, what other choice do I have? I might as well just play the game, right? And so it made me feel a lot of pressure. But I made it into the schools, and getting into that school, I felt on top of the world. I was like, yes, I've made it. But then a couple of seconds after, I was like, so now what? Right? I made it into the high school. So why am I not feeling this prolonged feeling of success? Why do I not feel this accomplishment? It almost felt like the next thing was college. And I was in the eighth grade, right? So I feel like a lot of the kids are chasing this milestone without even knowing why they're running a race. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And it is so taxing sometimes to keep pushing yourself, and then having a setback because someone else is doing better, right? It just it didn't feel like learning anymore. I was entered into, and I can't blame the Asian, I guess, culture that is being breeded. I can't really blame it because the only hope for, our immigrant parents is, oh, for our kids to get a good job. And how college brands itself is, oh, come to college, pay, a deadly amount of money, but you will get a diploma. You will be successful, whatever that means, right? And I fear that far too many of us, strive to become a valedictorian, but then when they're standing up on the stage, question, I spent all these hours for what? I I actually heard a valedictorian speech, and the guy said that he regrets being on top of the class. He said that it's a pretty viral video, but he said that there were so many friends that he didn't spend time with, so many opportunities that he missed out for studying a test, so many family bonding experience that he wasn't able to fully cherish. So it's like, well, I'm chasing this perfect GPA, I'm chasing these perfect club activities, but for what? Am I doing it for my own interest? Or am I doing it so that I get into a college for a name brand to sound good? Does that make sense? So once you really step back and question, hey, what is my motive for this? What is my motive of wearing my college name as a t-shirt, as a crown?
Hmm.
What am I benefiting out of this? Because no matter what institution you go to, if you're not actually learning, then what's the point? And that's the time I really stepped back and I was like, hey, I'm not learning to learn. I'm learning to check the boxes. And that made me sad because I am a very curious learner, I would say. I've always learned things out of passion by myself, and that daunting realization that, hey, I'm so motivated, so I just internalize these grades as a sort of achievement above my peers. What is that going to get me? And that was probably what struck me the most.
Hmm.
It was realizing that there's talent above numbers. There's talent and hard work above whatever success that a test or an admission will give you.
Yeah, that's a really big realization to come to.
Yeah,
And you
it's
said
scary.
it's scary. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
That was in seventh grade? Is that right? Is that what you're
Well,
talking about? That
seventh
time?
grade was more me expressing my frustrations for the school system. I was mad that we weren't really incentivized to learn. We were almost incentivized to play along with the system, to get a good GPA. That's all I learned. It was like, for example, teachers would praise you if you got good grades. So it was based on grades, not effort. Because in the schooling system, effort is measured by the standardized grade, but education can't be standardized. That's the realization. Education just can't be standardized because it's not universal with everyone. So that teacher praise really built into, hey, if I'm getting A grades, I'm doing fine. When in reality, maybe someone else who was getting C grades, B grades was learning more than I ever was. So grades are never reflective of effort. That's something I've really learned as the years go on.
Okay. And Yeah, that explains it very clearly,
Hmm.
what you said. So you said you're very curious, right? So you you kind of learn things out of your own motivation. You have that.
Percent.
But
I never can find someone else telling me to learn something and then me wanting to learn it. I have to
I
find it
see.
in myself. Yeah.
Okay, so how does this tie in with school and your frustrations with it? Since I bet there's some things in school that, so is it like there's a subject in school and then you find that motivation within yourself to study that? But where do the grades come in with that?
Yeah.
Does that
So
make
it's like,
sense?
oh, yes, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a struggle between, well, what is my end goal? So for a long time, I thought, oh, learning was my end goal, right? Because I was already learning grade levels above what I was being tested on. So I was like, okay, because in the third grade, I was writing tests for everybody else. It was a crazy time. I was able to sit out on most of my classes because the teacher understood that me sitting in the classes wasn't benefiting me.
Mm-hmm.
Me sitting in the classes was a waste of time pretty much because I was reading all the time. I already knew everything that was going on. So my teacher, luckily enough, let me write tests for everyone, which was a really cool thing. But I think it also breeded my superiority complex, as I previously
Mm-hmm.
stated. So it's a very tricky thing. But to answer your question, I would say the first time I started learning by myself a subject was eighth grade. Because in seventh grade, I had these frustrations, but I didn't find the benefits outweighing the cost, right? I was like, well, I have a lot of time on my hands, but I'd rather spend that time doing other things than actually learn because I'm getting the grade anyway, right? If I'm getting the grade anyway, then why bother actually learning the material instead of just memorizing?
Hmm.
It was more ease over actual learning ability, but I still had that frustration. But eighth grade, I had a teacher that I just could not understand. Their teaching method was just hurting my head, honestly. And at that point, I was telling myself, I was like, hey, I gotta stop. I have an SOL on this. So again, my motivation was the SOL.
What
My
is
motivation
SOL?
was the standardized test. Basically, it's a measure of learning that every year it's the state standardized test that kids have to take
It's just
to
Virginia only?
um,
Where you're from?
everyone has a standardized test, I think, but the SOL
Mm-hmm.
is a test that you take at the end of the year that tests you on state standards of
Okay, okay.
education. Right. It basically tells you if you passed or failed, and if you retained the knowledge that the school taught you, is basically what it was trying to say. So I was always working, I always had an external thing motivating me, a grade, an SOL, a test. But eighth grade was the first time that I actually learned the course material by myself. Um, and I just wanted to learn it. I thought it would be very interesting to me. And I was actually motivated to learn it by my spectrum teacher. Uh, so I would say that my learning up till middle school was always motivated by a grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until I attended Spectrum. So Spectrum is the middle school version of the gifted program. So my Spectrum teacher in eighth grade, he really changed my mindset.
Okay.
So this is where my real shift, I would say, in actually taking action really happened. So his classroom was structured very differently from any other classroom I've ever seen. Since Spectrum is not a core curriculum class like math or science, we weren't really tested on anything. It was just more like reaching some requirements in general, but it wasn't a core class. So just his classroom, there were so many seating options. You could sit on pillows, you could have standing desks, you can sit in tables if you want. They had like a very chill, like beanbag areas, a very chill environment. It felt like a very safe space. Our spectrum was actually located in a trailer outside of the school because the
Oh.
school didn't find it really important as a class.
Oh, really? Huh.
We didn't even have a full block of it really. It was just half a block.
I see.
Found that very frustrating too, that
Mm.
school almost dictates what is important for a kid to learn. Because if you think about it, a musician wouldn't need to spend 3 hours in math, 3 hours in science, right? You would think that they would want to spend all their time, or at least most of their time, in music class. But music class doesn't have as much weight in our middle school systems, in our public school systems, because our school almost decides what the kids should learn. And I find that really harmful too. But Spectrum really showed that, hey, you can do whatever you want. He placed a very loose kind of family like setting. And that was the first time I'd ever seen a classroom like a family. I've ever seen a safe space where you can talk whatever you want. And that's where my love of kind of communicating really, really set in. I knew that I liked speaking always. I was always a good presenter, I would say, but that's when it really solidified for me. And so he gave us passion projects. We didn't really have guidelines. We could do whatever. If we wanted to contact a mentor, we could do it. In public school, you usually find yourself restricted to, or I say public school as it's different from Spectrum, but I really found the two experiences to be really different. You would just find online resources. But in Spectrum, we contacted these hospitals that we wanted to research from. We contacted these big, big people that, we would never imagine contacting. And that was the first time my gears started churning. I was like, hey, this is really about learning. This is really about presenting an idea that you find meaningful to yourself. And it was when I first knew that I can't keep continuing like this in my schooling system. I have to make something meaningful for myself because I find passion out of meaning. I have to find something meaningful other than a letter grade, or I'm not going to be able to talk about it. I'm not going to be able to really immerse myself into it. So that was my first fundamental shift, I would say. And that's how I started balancing things and finding a way to not worry about grades as much and actually focus on learning.
Mm-hmm. So that half a block of a class did it
Yeah,
so much for you.
right. Exactly.
Mm. So,
Yeah.
if you had to describe this, what happened to you through this experience, I guess, like what was going on internally when you realized, I can actually just contact people
Yeah.
from outside the school or whatever, and I'm not
So,
restricted.
yeah, it wasn't a linear change. That was the hardest part ever. I mean, you start off from, your elementary school, always thinking that, oh, you're always going to be smart. You don't need to learn. I've never learned how to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
That concept never really came to me till actual high school, which I'll get to. And then middle school, I was just going by, I wasn't ahead necessarily. My parents didn't have time to teach me. So I was just going off of memorization, compensating. So that was my second stage, I'd like to say. First, it was really excelling. Then, second, it was going by. and really realizing that this wasn't what I wanted to do with my education. I had so much more value in myself and respect in myself that I didn't want to settle. Then high school comes. High school was, I've only finished my first year, but it was a really hard time for me. And I say it was hard because STEM school. It was the
Uh,
first time I went into a STEM school, and every single person there was genius, right? They
mm-hmm.
had all these capabilities that you couldn't even begin to comprehend. Some kids were already interning, some kids had their own like businesses. So I'm surrounded by kids who seem so knowledgeable. And at first, I'm so excited. I am like, yes, I'm going to bring my communication skills. Because at this point, I was part of my debate and speech team, which had a huge impact on me. I finally found a way where I was really passionate about the art of speaking and I wanted to develop my skills. And I joined this in eighth grade, by the way. So ninth grade, I was like really excited. I was like, yes, I'm going to bring communication in the STEM field. This is going to be a piece of cake. It's just going to be like middle school, right? And I really was not prepared on how it was going to go. As the year evolved, I found myself not able to manage my time, not able to keep up with the intense curriculum. It was like all the kids were used to what I was used to. So I didn't feel that at least compensation of, oh, at least you're like at the top of the class. I didn't feel that anymore because, to be frank, I wasn't at the top of the class. Um, and it's funny because you would think that, oh, like I'm failing to a kid in a STEM school is literally anything below an A.
Mm-hmm.
So the irony of it is insane because a lot of kids have gotten B's all their life, right? It's a good grade to some, but never to me, right? It was always, oh, 4.0 GPA. I'm not going to have a 4.0 GPA. I'm not going to be able to get into college. No college is going to want me. Therefore, I am not of worth. That was the mental circle. And I found that it was really hard for me to learn the way that other kids were learning. That was a mental shift because I'm not very good with, teachers telling me what to do. I'm more good with me going on my own path, me learning by myself. So I definitely had a learning curve where at first I almost gave up learning. I was like, none of this is working. I'm so frustrated. I'm not getting any of the material. I'm so behind, blah, 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 blah. I had this like mental craze. And then I kind of slowed down and I was like, hey, maybe I can start learning a little bit. But by this time, it was already kind of the end of the year. So the STEM school kind of really hit me that, hey, you're not that great. You are gifted, but you really have to put in the hard work if you want to learn something. And I almost found myself hating the process. I hated learning. It was so hard. It wasn't just an easy thing, especially with the rigor that the STEM schools put us through. It was very fast paced. It was nothing I've ever been used to. So, high school was a learning curve for me where I felt my confidence was like all time low in my capabilities. And I almost stopped speaking up. I kind of hushed my voice. I stopped participating in class because I didn't feel like my ideas were worth sharing because I didn't know what was going on in class. So then I calmed down and I knew I needed to reassess myself. And I started looking at how other people learned. I started learning more learning methods, and I'm still getting the hang of it. I am so good at procrastinating, it's horrible,
Oh no.
right? It's it's something that's definitely I'm learning,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm learning that, hey, it's okay to not be everything at once. I think that's the idea that schools love to throw at us, is that you have to be great at everything. You have to be president of all the clubs. You have to get perfect grades. You have to also, start your own adventure. So it feels really hard to compete with everything. But I read a blog post actually a little while ago. It was written recently by, I believe, Aaron Leif. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right,
Okay.
but they basically talked about the pastures and fences of education. And they talked about how we should slow down, think for ourselves, because honestly, the schooling systems have taught us how to think for like our past full adult lives. And it's no wonder how everyone has such a tough time learning in their 20s, right? So it really took me a step back and said, hey, the way that you're being tested, the way that you are being graded, it's not universal for everyone. I learned that not everyone's the best test taker. Not everyone understands the material on the first try. And not everyone has the same learning method. So it all felt so pointless to me. It was like, why try to standardize everyone? Is that even possible? Why try to, make kids only worried about GPA? Why is that so important? I had all these buzzing questions, especially in my teens, and I was so frustrated that I wasn't the best. Because for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't the top of the class. And I had been building years and years of worth on that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of like my story so far. And right now I'm really trying to break out of that mentality because it is so harmful. Um, I cannot express the amount of, breakdowns and worthlessness and feeling of purpose that I've had. It feels so hard, like someone's literally grabbing your throat and telling you to do it all at once. Like, be a free kid, enjoy your childhood, but also do X, Y, and Z, right? You should be practicing for, SATs. You should at least get, a 1550 by the end of junior year. You should have all these APs. You should already know, like, what you want to do with your entire life. These things that you hear from time to time. And it's crushing. It's crushing. But I'm glad that I've evolved. I'm glad that, my superiority complex is slowly getting ridded. So that's good. But yeah,
Yeah, that sounds. All I could think of was just how terrifying it sounds to come to terms with that.
yeah,
When you've been told. It sounds like you've been told your entire life how gifted you are, and you have stuff to prove that too. Until
yeah.
Mm,
It also is a thing. I think it's very pressed in our society, at least in, the Asian community, that getting good at your math and science is probably the most valuable thing you can do with your life. And as a kid who, has obviously a passion to talk, I really like literature, I read a lot, I write a lot. Those skills are very important to me, but I felt like I wasn't as good enough as my peers who were focused on math, who were focused on science. So I almost felt this, I would say, ladder on what was important. First being math and science, second
mm,
being writing and all those other skills. So I almost felt like my skills weren't as important as other people because of this.
I see. Yeah. I'm wondering, was there a time you felt pressured to go into science or math because you're also like you're a woman? I don't do you identify as I
Yes,
didn't ask,
yes.
sorry.
Also, yes. I think I wouldn't necessarily say it's because of my gender per se.
Yeah.
I think there is a thing where it's like, oh, to be a strong, independent woman, you need to go in the STEM field. And I have always had a conflicted view on what I want to do with my future.
Mm-hmm.
I never really know. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah.
It's like what kid wakes up one day and is like, I have my whole life figured out. But that's what you feel when you look at I would say maybe family, friends, or relatives. It seems like everyone else has their life figured out, and you're the only one that doesn't know what to do. And I think as a girl, I felt very pushed down, and not intentionally. I felt very weak compared to my maybe male counterparts.
Oh.
I because I think typically feminine traits, again, not to characterize anything, is to be good at literature, to be good at writing, to be good at speaking, right? Not necessarily math and science. When you think math and science, typically you think of men because they are majority go into STEM fields.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm in a STEM setting, I definitely felt like I have nothing to add because I'm
Oh
just a
yeah.
girl.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everyone in that STEM school has a bit of a superiority complex. To be
Mm-hmm.
honest, I hear so many people say, yeah, what's your PSAT score? Like it was some sort of medal. And I am guilty of participating and indulging in that too. But they wear their accomplishments like badges, right? They say, oh, like I have a higher GPA than you. And when everyone else talks about their grades, I feel horrible. I'm just sitting there because I simply, one, didn't find value in that anymore.
Oh, you're lagging a little.
Again, it's I mean, looking back on it now, I literally like everything. Whatever intrigues me, whatever I get a question about, I like it. But I do think my initial reason or why I felt so driven is because I felt like I had to prove myself. I felt like if I reach this milestone, then I'll be successful.
Okay.
If I reach this milestone, then I'll make who X, Y, and Z happy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'll feel accomplished. So I really did put my self confidence, my worth in jeopardy. I told myself that if I make it in the STEM school, then I will be successful like everyone else. And my meaning of success has definitely changed over the years. Although I think it is just so hard to really believe that. Because while I'm saying all this, that internalized root of, pleasing, my parents or pleasing the community and being a success story is something that's internalized so deeply within me that it is really hard to truly believe when especially when you're seeing other people succeed
Yeah.
to truly believe that you are worthy, that you do have something to prove, that just because you are not meeting the standardized requirement that you are still have a message that's worthy. So, something that has really helped me with that is my passion for connecting and speaking with others.
Mm-hmm.
it's really the thing that has helped me feel like I have something important to say, which is a little narcissistic, but I think as my skill develops, I do find great ways to acquire information, to talk to new people, see what their experiences are. It was my first, I guess, speaking competition.
All right, I think we're good, right? Was it
Yeah.
lagging? It's good?
Mhm.
Okay, so let's just start from, where we left off with the speaking competition. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, so I actually entered my speaking competition that I did in seventh grade by accident. So my dad um, has always kind of just enrolled me in random competitions,
Okay.
and I because that was his way of kind of stimulating me to learn by myself. So I did a speaking competition because my dad knew that I'd always liked presentations, I'd always liked talking. So I did that, and he trained me, I guess, a little. Like, we practiced a couple of times, and then I went and I did really well. And so that was the first time I would say I'd ever really won at something off the bat on my first try, like only like a week or two in advance for preparation. And I was so like confused and I was excited. I was like, whoa, this is a new door for me. Because anything before that had been like math, science, nothing that I'd really excelled at. And that wasn't because I was bad at it, just because I hadn't put as much effort in it as other subjects. And so speaking was finally the one thing that kind of clicked. So we continued with that. Eighth grade, I joined the speech and debate team in our local high school because they were opening for eighth graders as well. And so my speaking, I guess, career kind of continued off from there. And that's where I started getting more practice. I realized that I kind of had a talent for this, and I continued on to that path. I guess another path that I went on was joining karate. So karate was something that I'd started, I would say, beginning of middle school, and I had built such a wonderful community, and it was such a good experience to finally like put hard work in for like 2 to 3 years and then finally see the benefits pay back. So that was another path that I took, and then I did poetry and writing on my own. I am highly involved in music, so I play quite a few instruments right now on my own. And so I have a couple of paths and I read a lot. So I kind of found a couple of paths that I was really interested in. And through the form of competitions, I guess, I would prepare and see whether I liked what was going on or not. So that was kind of my self learning journey. I would just find things I was interested in, and subconsciously, I would just be learning without even really thinking that, oh, I'm learning, I'm building foundations, I'm building friendships. It was a more subconscious thing. But in school, my first time actually learning on my own was that moment that I had described before with my eighth grade class, where the teacher was frustrating to work with because it wasn't my teaching style or learning style. So I would learn that by myself. So that was kind of my openness to learning and always getting new things. I loved watching TED Talks. It was kind of my way to learn. So learning how I worked was really beneficial because it saved me a lot of time. I learned that I really do have to be self-driven. I can't have someone else teach me something that I'm not interested in, or else I'm not going to listen. And that videos and hearing people talk really is how it gets in my brain. So yeah, that was my first kind of journey into speaking, and now this is I finished my second year at the my high school's debate and speech team. And yeah, I feel like I've done and challenged myself pretty well, and I've built kind of a group, a community, which I'm really thankful for.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's like, do you feel like you've been able to separate yourself, your interests from school in a way? Because the things you described are all, they're, some of them are part of school, like the debate team, but
Mhm.
it's not like part of the main curriculum.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was funny because I'd always be sort of interested in subjects like in elementary school. I thought math was my thing because I was not naturally. I was just really good at that because I had been studying the curriculum in advance.
Right.
So when timing came, I was already really good at it. So I thought, hey, that's my passion because I excel at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't necessarily in the mindset where I was thinking, hey, what do I really like that's going to stick with my heart, no matter if I'm good or bad? That's what I wasn't learning. So, in terms of school subjects, I would say none of my passions really came from school because the thing that I find lacking is that I don't understand why we'll have to use, X, Y, and Z in my future. I don't understand where school subjects will be relevant because it seems so out of the blue, if that makes sense. Like we would be learning about photosynthesis, and I wouldn't understand why that was relevant to my life or why
Mm-hmm.
I should be interested in it. So my only motivation was, oh, a test grade. There's my motivation. So I'm a very motivation driven person, as I'm sure a lot of people are. And so at school, I never found a reason to care.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to find that out for myself, which was one of the biggest struggles working in a STEM school is finding why I want to learn the things I want to. But for speaking, it was different because I knew that I'd always been good at it and I knew that it was something that I wanted to extend because speaking was my way of learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mm-hmm.
So if I got better at speaking, I was automatically engaging. I love making connections with people. I love kind of learning more about people from their experiences. So speaking was just an obvious. And I would say that I'm a pretty competitive person. So debate also opened its eyes for me in, oh, obviously I would do debate because I want to get better at my argumentative skills. I want to get better at my research skills and everything else that is intertwined with debate.
Mm-hmm.
So I started speech and debate, and it was a way for me to get better. And I knew that it was something I was passionate at because even when I feel like I failed, or even when I did place in those competitions, I wouldn't feel achieved if I hadn't put the hard work for it. So I wasn't achievement based. I was more driven by the amount of hard work that I was putting in to my cases or speeches. So that's when I first knew that I really was passionate about speech and debate itself.
Yeah. So it's like you were maybe for the first time, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for the first time you felt joy from the process instead of just the achievements.
Yeah, at a thing that was kind of related to school.
Ah, I see.
Not related to school, like music, reading, writing. I had just grown to loving it. It was never really a forced learning process. It was just more self discovery and just me finding myself getting lost in pages or listening to music, playing
Mm-hmm.
music, etc. So that was where I was at with my personal interests, and I kept developing them because my learning style is not like many others. I It's quite frustrating when you're motivated by passion because you really have to build an interest before you can actually want to learn it. Like if I'm partially interested in something, I
Mm-hmm.
won't bother to learn it. And so that process of building my interest takes a long time, but I have been reaping benefits. So, worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's after building up the interest, finally you're seeing some payoff where you feel this motivation, this internal motivation, right?
Yeah.
So how are you able to discover this about yourself? How do you think other people can figure out their own way of learning?
Right. So I would say the first time is identifying what frustrates you. For example, what frustrated me was at one point, I didn't want to do fill in the blank worksheets. I didn't want stuff handed to me. I wanted to go and reach it. I wanted not to be motivated by grades because at one point I found them pointless. So I really found what frustrated me, and everyone has kind of like their I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but at least for me, I've always had a learning pattern kind of cut out for me. So everyone learns with what they enjoy doing. Whether some people, I'm sure they love to draw. So visual art helps them make connections in their brain. Some people, they have to say it out loud, like me, and teach it to someone else for it to really go in my head. And other people really, they absorb information when they have rest time, whenever they're not thinking about work, when they're just playing or running or whatever they're interested in. So I think people's learning patterns are really engraved in what they enjoy doing a lot of the time. So if we analyze what we enjoy doing or how we spend most of our time, we might be able to find out how we learn. Because to the core, we all are so curious. And I know it doesn't feel like, I know a lot of people in public schools don't feel like that, but I've heard so many people say that they find their love of learning once they leave school.
Oh.
Yeah. But yeah, that's the really only tips I have. Another thing I would say is, speaking from an Asian, Indian American standpoint, speaking isn't very a predominant skill that people want you to learn. People want you to learn science. So this was actually a really interesting shift for me because speaking isn't really valued as important or core curriculum activity. So I had a lot of people tell my parents, like family, friends, and such, tell my parents that I shouldn't pursue or shouldn't invest time in speaking, shouldn't invest time in debating. And when I heard people say this, I was shocked. I was like, whoa, why do they care so much on what I'm doing? Why is speaking not as valued as some other things like writing or math, right? So I was really confused to that almost cultural shift on how people don't understand how valuable certain things can be, like art or speaking, and how those types of skills are not identified as beneficial skills for the future. Because to an Asian family, again, generally speaking, STEM fields produce a lot of money. It means success. It means we can be able to support our families better. But speaking doesn't directly correlate to a job because it's universal. Everyone is going to have to learn good communication skills to succeed. So that was kind of like my advocacy for, hey, let's value speech as well. Let's be open-minded. But obviously I can't convince close to a lot of people because a lot of people are still not going to understand that. But it is something that I'm passionate about, and I'm glad that at least my parents are starting to see how much this means to me and how passion can be invested in different forms.
So when you began to realize more and more
Mhm.
how important speaking was to you, or speaking is to you. How did you kind of reason or think through this situation where so many relatives and your family was telling you it's not important, and they were af- afraid that investing time in speaking wasn't going to help you in the future? How did you come to terms with this within yourself?
So when I first joined the speech and debate team, my first few competitions, they did really, really well. Like, so that was at first a very externally motivated thing. I was like, hey, I'm really good at this. Let me keep doing this so I feel this kind of dopamine rushing through me. But as I progressed, obviously you're not going to win first place in every single one of your competitions, no matter how good you are. So I realized that there were so many things I had to work on, so many places that I had to develop. And over time, I was kind of known as, oh, she speaks. Because in my spectrum class, I was very outspoken. I talked about my feelings to my class. I shared. I was kind of known as, the person that presents. So from going from someone who really had no purpose or really didn't know what I liked or what I was known for, to going to someone who kind of had an identity. Oh, she's good at presenting. Oh, she has a skill for connecting with others, being having empathy. So I saw that through speech, I formed kind of an identity for myself. I was improving in skills that you wouldn't think were clear at first sight. I was listening more to others. I was watching more complex videos. I was there obviously there's different types of speech, so I had to do a lot of research. I had to fail. I had to learn how to do a lot of things with and obviously the social skills that comes with being part of any club. So I learned a lot more than just what you would think as opening your mouth and talking. I was learning more than that. And I had an identity for myself for the first time. So it was something really exciting for me. And I wasn't going to let someone else, I guess, ruin that for me. Also, these relatives that would come over to my house, I would be the only kid that was actually talking to the adults, that was in
Oh.
conversation, right? And I'm not saying that to kind of go back into my old patterns of, oh, so I'm better than all the kids. It's not that. It's just I see where I can really use my skills to engage with adults, where so I can really see my strengths, where they lie, right? I I just became more aware of myself. I was aware that, hey, I might not be the best person to research. I might not be the best person to do science, but one, I can always get better. And two, here's what I can bring to the table. And so me finally realizing what I was capable of and what I brought to the table really helped me think that, hey, this is a valuable trait. Me being able to talk to adults on issues that I was passionate about and not be afraid of them or not just sit on my phone made me feel like important, made me feel like motivated to keep going. And I'd always been like that, but this is the first time that it connected in my brain that this is what I bring to the table. So finding what you bring to the table, I think, is important for many teens. And I'm afraid that often in a schooling system where everything is standardized, everything is kind of cookie cut out for you, we might not be able to see what sets us apart. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this quote. It was like, if you test a fish on its ability to climb a tree, something like that, then the fish is going to never think that it's valuable enough or has no skills, because we're measuring students on their ability to climb trees. And some people are natural students that are great at climbing trees, and some people are more water animals. Some people know how to fly. So because everything is so standardized with how our public education system is working, we are not able to get anywhere. Most students don't know what sets them apart. And if they do know, they don't know how to express that because of these aunties and uncles that are telling you what society wants from you.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that you feel like you were able to find that for yourself. That's great to hear.
It really, I just have so much frustration with school now. As I'm learning more and more about different options for education system, it frustrates me that the students are the ones that are paying the price because, and it's not the people working at these public schools that are at fault. I think it's the system itself. And I'm not afraid to critique the system. I think when you have a system that is not motivated by competition, because public schools have nobody to compete with, if that makes sense. So the only way to evaluate performance in a public school is to get the kids' scores. And right now, I've spoke to some of my mentors about teacher unions and how, teacher pay isn't determined by the skill of the teacher, but more on how long the teacher has stayed at a school. So a lot of these little, I would say, factors has really made school decentivize the performance of teachers, decentivize schools actually finding better ways to assess kids, to develop kids' interest. Because one teacher can't focus on 26 children or how many ever children there are in a classroom. It's just not possible. So, because kids are not getting that same education system, everyone is on one standardized scale, it makes it very hard for students to find their potential, to step outside of those pastures and fences, as the theme of this video, to really find out where they want to be. And I know that the grass is always going to be greener on the other side, and I can make critiques for days. And that's why I encourage whoever is watching this or whoever to really explore different ways of studying. Because if we only rely on a school system, then I'm afraid that we might not, as kids, especially for people who are part of the Asian culture, that might not be able to dive into homeschooling head first, right? For those people to really be aware that these are our childhood years. These are years that we are never going to get back, and we are never going to be able to have that freedom in a public school system. And so we should at least try to carve out some time for ourselves, not worrying about GPA so much, not worrying about extracurriculars, being the captain of this, that, all this, and just focus on finding what we like, finding what frustrates us, and then just going for it. So that's where I am right now. And the early 20s, people's early 20s is such a good indicator of how much the school system has built these walls in kids' heads, right? Because you have early 20 somethings not knowing what they're going to do with their life, not knowing what they like, spending all these times getting a degree, a piece of paper. And this is all easy for me to say, but I still struggle with this. If I get a B in a test, I'm going to feel horrible. I'm going to be motivated by these grades. But it's definitely something that I recognize and I'm trying to step out of and spend more time doing things that I want to do, unlike SAT prep,
Yes, definitely. Tell me more about the fences of education and, like you said, how school builds these fences within our mind and leading to people sometimes not knowing who they are in their 20s.
Right. So let's take a high schooler, for example. if you ask most, I would say, again, speaking for myself and mostly the Asian community, which is where I've seen this foster, most kids are going to spend their summers in SAT prep, right? They're going to spend their summers building up knowledge for a standardized test that has absolutely, I mean, little to no value in their future careers. And it's sad because SAT, standardized tests, is what is going to get you into a college, which is what is going to get you into jobs. So I understand the mind work that these kids are going through. But the fact that students feel such a fear that, oh, I'm going to be missing out if I have not SAT prepped, if I have not learned how to take a standardized test, rather than explore what I want to do with life, right? I fear that too many students these days are finding that their passions are a waste of time, that seeking out what they want to do in this world is going to take too much of their schedule. And it shouldn't be like that. Our passions and finding what we want to do, it should be our schedule. That should be the main focus for everything we're doing. So it kind of seems counterintuitive when we're taking all these tests, but coming out of it not knowing what we want to major in. I've heard a lot of YouTubers personally spending so many hours just going for Stanford, right? But once they actually get into Stanford, Harvard, Columbia, all these schools, they don't know what they want to major in. They don't know where they want to take their life apart from that, because they spent so much time getting into the school, not knowing what to do in the school. So we've just been programmed like that. We're literally like robots. People tell us to work hard, but they don't tell us why we should work hard.
Wait. Are you saying it's more valuable to figure out your passion in life instead of figure out how to make money? And
no,
to figure out how I can get into this top Ivy League school, my passion is more important than that?
Wait, can you rephrase that?
I'm being sarcastic.
Okay. Like, wait, if you're serious? I'm by no means discouraging people from trying to get into an Ivy League school. I'm just saying, just make sure you know what you're going to do at an Ivy League school. Just know that, because passion is how you're going to get money. Passion is what is going to drive you after you have a degree, right? And I'm not discouraging anyone from getting a degree. I'm just saying that spending all your time getting familiar with the standardized test is not going to be beneficial in the long run, because nobody is going to their gravestone with their SAT score plastered on their forehead, right? It's not a unit of measurement that truly measures how much potential one has. It's really, and anyone can make money. I'm sure that people who have not found their passions, who have focused on an SAT test, are going to make money. I'm just saying, in the long term, what do you want? Do you want to know what you're going to do with your life and spend so much less time in the future struggling to find a job? Because if you don't have a job that, one, you enjoy, and two, where you actually know what your strengths are, you're not going to do as well as someone that knows their strengths, knows what their passion is, and knows how to keep pushing themselves. So that was kind of my understanding, and not to discourage anyone from actually going through a public school. But no, you're right. Yes, we should focus on our passions. It's funny that these people it's kind of sad actually that, we're trying to get 1,500 hours of volunteer work. All for what? All for because you are truly wanting to help the community, or to put on a resume, right? And it's And as competition rises, everyone is doing their 1,500 hours. Everyone is going to be finishing high school. Before getting into college, we had so many less criterias. It was pretty simple to get into a good college, right? Get good grades. But now, getting good grades is the minimum. So I think it's important for people to understand, not to be discouraging, that you're never going to be enough if you're basing yourself off of a college or public school terms, right? Our worth is something that we're going to have to find within ourselves. Our passions are something we're going to have to find within ourselves. And anyone who tells us otherwise, anyone who tells us that a great GPA is what we should focus on in life, obviously has not gotten to that maturity level yet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so sad because I can specifically see these fences being built up when I hear my peers, the first thing they ask people who graduate is, oh, what's your college? As that is like a badge that should be worn, as that is somehow how a college name, how these letters are supposed to tell the person how much this senior is worth. So if someone got into, let's say, Princeton, it's like, oh, wow, that's a really great school. You must be really smart. I think it's important to identify why we ask those questions instead of, hey, what are your passions in life? What projects have you done recently? Is there anything I can help you with? Instead of asking that, we're establishing an environment where we assess ourselves and our peers with name brand. And I find that really unfortunate. And it just shows how brainwashed we are, really, when our priorities shift that much. And I'm guilty of this. For the longest time, I had a Harvard poster like in my room, like, yes, I'm going to go to Harvard. I'm going to be like Elle Woods from Legally Blonde. I'm going to do this. And once I get into Harvard, that's my golden ticket to life. And that golden ticket is simply not true because you see so many people. It's funny because college is a business. It's a business that wants students to take them in so that they can profit off the name. We see if Mark Zuckerberg, right, had stayed at Harvard, I'm sure he would have been successful. But it just goes to show that these people, they dropped out. They didn't need to stay in an institution to make something for themselves. That's what I'm trying to say. And many people don't recognize that. Many people don't question why they're doing the things they're doing to get their golden ticket, or even question why that is a golden ticket. Because that's the idea we've been fed for that long. And that's why it feels so scary to seek alternative education, because you're confined in those fences. You're scared that there won't be a world where you'll be safe outside of those fences. But sooner or later, you're going to be kicked out. Not kicked out, but you're going to stop having a calendar for you. You're not going to have grade 14, right? You're going to have to find it out for yourself. And I would say one of the most beneficial things you can do for yourself is try to break free from those fences and question why they're up in the first place. So to rephrase, grades, GPAs, college is a golden ticket. These are all kind of the fences and ideas that we've been fed and regurgitated multiple times. And it's affected how we talk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in my mind, it's always slowly built up fences. And then before you know it, you're like...
Before you know it, you're too scared to step out. That's really it.
Yeah. And I love that golden ticket metaphor you used. I think that's very accurate. Yeah. Very, very accurate. It's like, when I get my golden ticket, I don't need any of the stress anymore. It'll all be worth it.
it's the lie that we tell ourselves. It's the lie that I told myself for years trying to get into that STEM school. I
Mm-hmm.
said, once I get into that STEM school and I project this perfect idea of myself, this super confident, super smart, super popular image of myself, and I said that if I get into this school, I will achieve all that. But the deadly realization is, whether you get into the school or you don't, is that you're still going to be you. And you can make those things. You can be confident. You can be well educated without getting into these so called golden ticket, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
make a golden ticket. And nothing is all, I mean, golden ticket is a little misleading because nothing is ever going to come like this, right? It takes years and years of hard work. And that's something that we ought to consider.
Yeah. What is something you could tell maybe somebody who is just coming to realize that these fences exist, or maybe they're beginning to look into this, or they're very frustrated with school? And
Yeah.
but is there something you can tell them to make them feel, I guess, less afraid of stepping out of that fence or taking a look at what's beyond that fence?
Right. I would say that, see, this is something that I'm still struggling with to this day. So I would first step, your environment really matters. So if you're always surrounded with people that are concerned about grades, that are concerned about or fostering the idea that, oh, I got an A minus, therefore I'm not worthy, surrounding yourself by those negative people, while they might not intend it, is really harmful because it's just like a feedback loop. You're going to think about it again and again and again if all your friends are thinking about it. So either talk to your friends, get new friends, or at least surround yourself in a environment, because you're not alone. There's so many people that feel frustrated, and I think school is doing a really good job of two things. One, making kids frustrated, right, with their school system, and two, getting kids in student loan debt. It feels like schools are just designed to get you in debt, really. Um, so I would say, please know that you're not alone and surround yourself in an environment that is more, I guess, progress based rather than an external validation based. So that's what I would say. Next, I would definitely talk about your struggles, identify that, and you'll have to find your learning style, and you'll have to know that when things get hard, you're going to be tempted to resort to, oh, let's take the easy way out and memorize, right? Rather than do this. So if science is something that you're just not interested in, just make sure that you're not spending so much of your life on science then. If math is something that you're not interested in, you don't need to, put all your blood, sweat, and tears into math. Just spend more time focusing on what you're truly passionate about. And obviously, don't just let math, science, and go. You have to check the boxes, unfortunately. And I know that some people, realistically, you do have to somewhat play the game. But based on what you're interested in, if you're just interested in learning in general, like me, like I just like learning for the sake of it, then it's really a mental adjustment to take the time out of my day and really learn every single concept by heart and try to apply that to my real life, talk about it to someone else, and really keep practicing it. And I'm only going to do this if it's worthwhile of my time. So, for example, English is something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I spend a lot of time with. So obviously, I'm going to take the time and effort to spend my time on English. And in areas like maybe history that I'm not so passionate about, I'm never going to use again. I'll just do what I have to. But before, I wouldn't seek out my passion. That's the difference. But now I would spend that extra time because now you know what you want and you don't want. You can kind of take control of your own education and spend more time in those areas. If math is what you're interested in, then by all means go outside of the curriculum and learn math. Talk to people, surround yourself with people that are interested in math. And if you get something wrong, again, like the most basic study tips, like ask what you got wrong, practice it and practice it. And maybe just don't focus as much time on English because math is what you're truly passionate about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So
Um,
identify what your passions are and know what your requirements are and obviously meet those requirements, but spend more time for your passions and surround yourself with a group that realizes that grades aren't what define you. As
mhm,
cheesy as it sounds, but
mhm,
it really is true. Before I used to be in a group where it's really hard in a STEM school too because everyone is externally motivated. So I really stepped back from that because it was a really toxic way of thinking. Step back from that, found some people that shared my frustration, and don't go too hard on yourself because you're always going to be finding a way to feel bad about yourself. Like literally a few weeks ago, I'm taking a kind of a summer course, and you get graded for that. And I just felt horrible when I got like an 8 out of 10 on a quiz. And then I thought about it in retrospect and I was like, this is just a course criteria that I need to meet. Like 2 questions, is it going to matter in 10 minutes? Is it going to matter in 10 days, 10 months? I really like doing that because that kind of puts things in perspective that things don't matter as much as you think they will.
mhm.
Even the craziest situation, like getting cyberbullied, right? It's not going to matter in 10 months, or in some cases more than that, but it's not going to matter in 10 months because you're just the talk of the school and it's not going to matter. So thinking of that is soothing, and just know that you have control, right? To whoever might be struggling, just know that all the resources are at your hand. We're in such a lucky digital age time where Google can tell us pretty much anything, and information, whatever we want, is at the tip of our fingers. And everyone will find their passion if they put enough time and effort into it. So that's my advice.
Yeah. Okay. I'm hoping someone out there will benefit from that.
There's
Yeah.
a couple of things to unpack, and you really have to understand that it's not a linear journey. It's definitely not linear. You're going to have ups and downs, but knowing that there will always be an up after a down session is so important. And
Mhm.
finding that network of people that understand your frustration and understand the struggles that us students go through every day is just what helped me.
Yeah, there's some really good advice in there. Mhm.
Yeah.
And right, I think when you're in a system, the system of school where you've been trained to for your brain has been trained to go down that familiar path of I got 8 out of 10 on this test. That means
Mhm,
I'm failing. I'm gonna
mhm,
if I screw this up, I'm not gonna get into a good college. I'm not gonna
yeah,
get a good job. My life is over. It's
mhm.
trained us into being anxious, I think, essentially.
Oh my god, so much, especially for overachievers, right? Because you're really put in an environment that thrives off of insecurity, that thrives off of not doing good enough compared to this X, Y, and Z. It thrives off of that, really. And so it just so much anxiousness, so much stress. Like, it's crazy to me when I was watching a couple of people like Peter Gray. He's an educational, he talks about education a lot. It's crazy to think that kids were playing when they were 8. It's crazy
Uh,
to think that most kids were playing in the forest up to like age 12, just not even once worrying about like homework or staying up late, right? Just in the wild, free. because they were kids, and we're never going to get that because we're always driven to think, oh, when I'm at college, I can rest, right? I won't have to do college work. And then you get to college and you think, oh, but once I finish college and I get a job, then I can settle down. And then you get a job and you think, oh, let me push and push and push for my family. And then when I get kids, I can settle down. But I'm afraid that we're never going to settle down until maybe retirement. But did, did we just spend our entire life worrying about pieces of paper and numbers, that in our wheelchair we're going to have no memories? We're going to have no good, oh, like, hey, that was my childhood. Here's a funny childhood memory, is going to be filled with textbooks, right? I'm afraid that our childhood, what we aim for is what? A fulfilling, satisfying life when we sit back on our wheelchair. And I like to use this a lot because it helps me put things into perspective. When I'm sitting in my wheelchair, do I want to think about all the anxious moments and meltdowns that I had throughout my teenage life? Or do I want to think about the good friendships that I made? And I know that seems like I'm saying, oh, just YOLO, just do whatever you want, do drugs, do this, because it's an experience, but it's not. What I'm saying is that we're so on overdrive mode all the time that we really do need to show back and realize how much time we could have used to make a friend, to make someone's day better, to learn about someone, to take opportunities to our advantage. So that's where I'm at. And if you look, there are a lot of programs and opportunities at our disposal. I mean, competitions are just one form, but I think I've learned the most when I went to summer camps, where it was just kind of like a daycare, really. But you learn so much from people all over. You go on field trips. Some are STEM camps, and even the STEM camps I've had so much fun in. I did an aviation STEM camp called Can, and I got so many opportunities. I got to fly a commercial plane
Wow.
with an instructor.
What was the camp called? Can you just...
It's called Can. It's a STEAM camp.
How do you spell it? Real quick.
So she can, and then just write STEAM, okay. STEAM, and you'll realize I can send some pictures maybe, but it was located at the Udvar Hazy Space Museum, right next to close to my house. And so I saw kids all the way from Alexandria, from Maryland, all in the locating districts. And I built a group of friends that I still talk to today. It's funny, after 2 years, we're still in touch. So it was just such a good experience. I would recommend it to anyone, but this was outside of a public school system. This was a camp that me and my family had sought out. So there are a lot of great experiences, even for someone that doesn't have the resources or doesn't have the availability to do homeschooling or unschooling, right? Not a lot of people have those privileges. And so for those people, there are still so many ways for you to get that experience for yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, I would really like to talk more about your superiority complex, as you've mentioned before, but I'm not sure if we can cover that in like the time we have left, because it seems like a pretty big thing. What do you think?
Right. I can briefly okay, what specifically did you want to know about it?
Yeah.
How it's breeded in general and how I think the effects are of it, or
more like I just feel like it's a more common occurrence than some people think, and it comes for some people, like for me it comes with a lot of shame, because it's almost like you're constantly questioning if this is who you are, almost like
like
it's like
you feel evil when you hear, oh, I can't believe I compared myself all these years.
yeah, and then it's when you see yourself doing it, there's that, it's frustration and guilt, and just like it's very easy to beat yourself up over doing that, as well as on the flip side you get this rush of
feeling good.
Yeah, that
You benefit from it. Yeah.
mm-hmm.
So the internal workings almost of what I feel and how people who feel it can navigate through it.
Yeah, like I guess how it works within yourself, as well as I guess how you came to recognize that other people have worth, and it's
yeah, that is such a okay. So superiority complex is such, again, like a complex subject, hence the word. But obviously I talked about how it got into me because I was born in a very competitive environment from the womb, right? It seems like once I was born, there was already a competition going on. So we see this, and being externally validated. Superiority complex usually comes from people that really don't know what to do with their life. They don't have any sense of purpose, right? So the only way that we feel validated is to compare ourselves to others, to at least console ourselves that, hey, at least we're not as bad as this. At least we are getting A's, or at least we get a golden star. And so for the most of my life, obviously I'm comfortable with using the term now because I've come to terms with it and I'm working on it. But before, yes, it really does invoke a lot of guilt, because when you think about it, you never want to be like, yeah, I'm better than you. You would never say that to somebody's face. And a superiority complex does not mean we truly, to the core, believe that we're better. It's more a defense mechanism for us to not think about why are these things happening to us? Why are we not enjoying the fruits of our labor, really? Why is a grade A not make me feel like I'm competent to someone who's really in tune or seems in tune with their passions? So not finding that passion, and everyone can only get externally validated and not worry about it for so long before they start to question their real worth, before they start to question what they want to do with their life. So a superiority complex is really a way to temporarily console ourselves and make us feel like, hey, at least we are getting good grades. At least I can do a presentation without stuttering. At least I have that. Instead of really thinking, oh, well, first of all, it's an ignorant thing because you're choosing to think only about yourself. You're not thinking of what anybody else's life might be like. I know a lot of people aren't presenters, but they have really good writing abilities. And whenever I saw someone else succeed, I would be like, well, but I have blah, 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 blah. I would try to rationalize it and make it a competition, because that's how standardizing does it for us. Everyone is based on climbing a tree. Standardized tests is where superiority complex comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm still finding my sense of purpose. I haven't gotten it all figured out at all, right? Still to this day, I say, oh, he's good at science and math, but I can talk to adults, right? So obviously I have the great because communication is a lifelong skill.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bad mentality to have, because one, we aren't comparing, we aren't competing, we're looking to better ourselves. And I really had to learn this second part, but you only know the side of people that they choose to show. You don't see the side that might be working hard hours. You don't see the side that might not have the actual financial abilities to afford the instruments that I do, the camps that I do. So, me almost comparing myself due to insecurity is such a ill way to look at it. But that's not to portray everyone that has a superiority complex as a monster. I would just say it's something that needs to be recognized, it's something that needs to be noticed, and something that you can seek to stop.
Mm.
Because once you focus on yourself, really, just focus on yourself, it's way easier said than done. And don't try to discredit other people to bring yourself up. That's the biggest part of a superiority complex. It's always, what's the other guy doing? I saw this metaphor in somebody's YouTube video, but they said when people are racing in a race car, the person who's going first never stops to look around at what everybody else is doing. He's focused on his track because as soon as he looks to the side, the other person will zoom past because you're distracted. So once you view it as a journey to the finish line, not a competition or something, it gets a lot easier because you can identify your weaknesses, you can identify your strengths, but you can also acknowledge that other people are talented, hardworking, smart, and those two can coexist. Two talented people can coexist, and we don't have to have the superior one. So that is really what a superiority complex is, and it's breeded by standardized tests and external validation.
Mm.
My whole problem with public schools, if that wasn't clear enough.
Yeah, so it's
But yeah.
like that. Did the guilt kind of drive you to try to figure it out? Or like what was the motivation behind changing that way of thinking for you?
So I am very analytical with what goes on in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So when I found myself doing this, and I still do this to this day guiltily, but I am getting way better at it. What I realized is that, I analyzed that, this is stemming out of insecurity. I'm comparing myself to other people because I don't know how to evaluate myself without comparing to others. That's a good way to put it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When you use other people as your achievement mark, you'll never find results that you're happy with. You have to use your past self as your achievement mark so that you'll make progress. So that's what I was saying. So my motivation was finding out the cause of this, which was insecurity. And I didn't want to be insecure anymore. I mean, obviously nobody wants to be insecure anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to find my passion. I didn't want to just keep telling myself that I was better. I wanted to prove to myself that I could be better than my past version. So that's where my motivation comes in. And a personal moment so that I can share so that people don't feel like whoever's talking about issues has it all figured out is that I was looking at someone's business profile, and it showed how many kids were doing business entrepreneurship opportunities. And I just melted down on my bed. And this was a week ago. I melted down on my bed because I felt so incompetent. I was saying that, oh my God, look, this person has already made a product for teens to use, and they are a teen. What am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my life? Uttering syllables? Wow, I see where the comparison is. And then I really did have to step back and say, hey, good for them. First of all, congratulate whoever you're doing, because good for them. They're doing great things in their life. And I'm sure that it's funny because I actually compare myself to people whose interests are nothing like mine, right? Even if I wanted to spend hours in a robotics competition, I couldn't. I don't like it. And so it's funny that even in my own...
Oh, your sound is muffled.
No.
Oh,
Can you
it's
hear
good
me?
now. It's good now.
It's funny because in my own head, I have my own biases, which are, oh, speaking is lesser than robotics. Argumentative skills, research skills, economics, these are all less than blah, blah, blah. But whenever I see someone else doing art, I think, wow, that's amazing. Like, you are so talented. But I don't apply that same standard for me.
Uh-huh.
So it's a very, again, complex thing because you're insecure, but you also want to feel better. And I just didn't want that cycle to happen again. And it was my coping method was learning. So I sat on that bed for a good 5 minutes, and then I got up and I learned. I did research on things that I was interested in, and a few, like 20 minutes later, I felt great because I knew that my valleys are always going to be met with the peak. I'm always going to be learning more, and not everybody's success is apparent through competitions. People's success is apparent through the smile that's on their face, right? Through how much work they've actually put into bettering themselves. So I reminded myself that that's what I should look at and gave myself a pep talk. It's way easier to say all these things and be like, yeah, like, don't measure yourself by everybody else's standards, like
Mm-hmm.
one of those cat posters that you see on the wall. But it's hard to really internalize that, and I'm still working on it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had a similar meltdown and just like cried on my bed thinking about how worthless what I'm doing is and comparing myself.
But just know that a superiority complex or comparing yourself or putting yourself on a pedestal, it might give you that temporary feel like I'm good, I'm doing good, but it's not. It's temporary for a reason.
Yeah.
And I think everyone will mature out of it eventually, but to get a head start on that, just try to find your own passions. Make your own way. Again, my thing is learning because I find my brain stimulated by that. Somebody else's might be talking to someone, right? Writing about their feelings, right? Through a poem. I did that a lot. I would say my 7th grade year, when I felt a lot of frustration, I would let it out through poetry. And it was a great outlet. I actually still have those poems and I keep tweaking it and I keep writing them. And maybe one day I will publish them. Who knows, right? There's so many ways to find an outlet, and finding that positive, healthy outlet is also really important.
Definitely.
That's my whole spiel on superiority complex, unhealthy outlet.
Thanks for that. Yeah.
You're welcome.
This might come off as a kind of strange question, but tell me if it's too difficult to answer. But if you imagine that your younger self, maybe who is struggling way more with this superiority complex, if you imagine your younger self seeing like a version of you now as you are now, what do you think that, and maybe like detach it so that your younger self doesn't recognize it to you, but what would they think of you?
So funny enough, when I was younger, I didn't feel the guilt because I didn't realize what I was doing. I just knew that it was a way to make me feel better. And as I've kind of matured, I realized, wow, that was a really horrible way to go about it, even if I still do find myself trapped in it. Before, I really did measure success with those pats on the back that my teacher gave me, right? And I would kind of understand it like in middle school. So I would be talking to my middle school self here because that was when it clicked that, hey, this is a bad thing that I'm doing. Hey, me asserting that I'm getting these grades. So, for example, a thing I would do was I would try to casually assert the great grade I was doing. Like, I was that snobby kid for a little bit in my life where I would ask people their grade just so that they can ask me what my grade was. It's just something I'm really aware of. Just I would do little snobby things like that to try to make myself feel better and try to assert to everybody else that I'm the alpha female. Like, don't
Hmm.
mess with me. I'm so smart, and I have to let you know that because I don't know that, right?
Yeah. So do you think
So
your younger self would be proud of who you are today? Or would they be confused? I guess that's what I'm trying to get at. Is it hard to
um,
say? I don't know.
yeah, but so I think okay. So for my elementary school self, where I was doing this and didn't realize it, I think I would be confused, or I wouldn't really see a difference. I wouldn't understand the impact because it does really take maturity over time, over years, to understand that this is not a good thing to do. Um, and I had so I think my elementary school self would be confused, and then my middle school self would be like, "Thank God she's on the path to maturing." Um, so I a short example of it finally clicking in my head. This is probably one of the most impactful moments of my life. It was an eighth grade competition, and I was it was my one of my it was my first year in speech and debate, and I went to the finals, the final round. Right, I was in the final round. It was There were like five other kids, and I was the youngest. I was the only eighth grader with my first year of speech. So I was so proud of myself. I was like, yes, yes, yes. And so we were talking outside. And a tricky thing that I would do that I think a lot of people do is that they would put themselves down. They'd be like, oh, I only got first place on this competition. It's nothing big. So I was one of that. Ugh, hate that. I literally cringed thinking that that was like a year ago. But I would kind of put myself down, but also brag about myself, like a humble brag. There, that's the word. I was a humble brag. And one of the guys called me out. And he was someone that I had made friends with in during the course of the tournament. And he called me out. And I think that was the first time I had someone say to my face like that. And he wasn't rude about it, he just was being honest. And on that ride home, I was constantly repeating exactly what he said. I was like, "Oh my god." And the guilt started to set in. That was one of the first times the guilt really killed me. Obviously enough that I remember it a year later. But it really hit me that this is not something that is okay to do because it's not benefiting me. It's not benefiting the people around me because I'm trying to downplay stuff. I realized, oh my god, I am so insecure that I have to tell other people my achievements. I have to tell other people my grade as a sort of way to tell them that I'm better than them, right? Because it was a high school competition, and I was like, yeah, I'm only in eighth grade. It was my first year, so it was just such an embarrassing moment, and I think past me would be proud of who I'm starting to be now. Again, I'm still in the metamorphosis stage. I'm still in my cocoon. I'm not emerged from that. And I think I'll always be sort of in that cocoon. I think everyone will. It's a process. But I think I would be proud of myself because superiority complex is a tricky one to navigate.
What was it that he told you exactly? Do you remember the
So,
words?
right. So I'm still friends with him. He goes to another STEM school in another county, but he just called me out casually. He said like, "Oh wow, like I see what you're doing. You tell everybody that you don't like or you don't really care about this, but then you also make sure to assert um how wonderful you are. You should be a little careful about that." Or I'm not sure what the correct wording was, but he said it in a joking manner,
Hmm.
but he called me out. Which I'm glad he said it in a joking manner because I'm very sensitive. But he said, "Oh wow, I see what you're doing. You're trying to downplay yourself and then brag about yourself." And then I was like, "Oh, that is what I'm doing." It's weird because it's like you're aware of what you're doing, but you're not really aware of the how bad it is till someone calls it out. And the guilt, just set in, and I was so guilty.
Yeah, that's what friends are for, right?
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly. The people who will encourage you on, sure, but if you see something that's wrong, please say something. And no, I'm really thankful for him and having him there. That was really a pivotal moment in my life.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, that's so much. Um, Thank you for, yeah, thanks for sharing that.
No, it's okay. I've just gotten more comfortable with it. And whenever people tell me, "Oh, you're so smart, you're so talented," blah blah blah, I'm just thinking in my head, they're only seeing what I'm showing them. And so a lot of people are like, "Wow, like I love your confidence when you speak," and I'd be like, "Thank you," because I'm also learning how to accept compliments without putting myself down. Because I'm so over that, right? I want to be proud of my accomplishments without rubbing it in people's faces. But it really goes to show how little people know of you, how little I know of someone that I might be comparing myself to. So we really only know who we see,
Hmm.
and school just breeds that pitting against each other, really.
Hmm. Yeah. Before we close, is there anything you want to say that you haven't said yet?
Right. So I think moving forward, I'm really trying to understand new perspectives. I'm wondering how a child who has never been to a public school will develop. I'm wondering how how I will grow as a person. But luckily, I know that to whoever watching this, that it is always a journey, and no matter how you take it, you're always going to be ending up in a good place. Um, for now, I'm just trying to discover how other actual legitimate alternative education systems like unschooling and homeschooling are affecting children's minds, how they're affecting their mindset, their anxiousness. And I hope that we can listen to advice of people like Peter Gray, like I mentioned, and incorporate more child's play and really find people's passions. But yeah.
Hmm. Well said. Yeah. And for the final question, when I say the phrase "walk your path," what
Right.
does it bring up for you?
Ooh, that's a really good one. Walk your path is something so interesting to me, right? Because when we're talking about pastures and fences, it's built on the idea that you already have a maze cut out for you. But walk your path is someone daring to say that, hey, I understand that, these pastures and fences might be inevitable to escape from, but I would to choose to direct my own education, to direct my own choices in life. I would choose to question, I would choose to improve. Really, I think everyone has room for growth, and choosing that path to grow, to be vulnerable, to share your experiences shows power, shows confidence. And I think that's what walk your path really encapsulates, is the vulnerability and the daringness to create something for yourself.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
you're welcome.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful phrase that you can think of, because so little people walk their own path. Really,
Mm.
they walk on things that have been established for them, or they don't choose to question a lot of life, including myself. And walk your path really challenges those ideas that have been rooted within us, and really challenges the status quo, which I admire.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I enjoyed talking with you so much.